Thank you. Thank you, Vidya, for the introduction. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So I was meeting somebody some time back, and they said nowadays when you meet people, they say three words. They say hello, then they say Gen AI, and then they say ESG. But anyways, jokes apart, ESG is a very fast evolving space. And without getting into the virtual debates of ESG and all of that, what I will focus on is what is data doing in ESG and how can we leverage data and analytics for enabling ESG outcomes. Before I jump right in, let's take a moment and rewind back a little bit in time. Just a week back, around the same time, we had a cyber outage which literally brought the entire world to a grinding halt. It impacted operations across the world in different sectors, including airlines, including banking, media, etc. The total cost of this cyber outage is estimated to top 1 billion US dollars, right? This cyber outage was an important and stark reminder of the importance of cyber resilience in today's very connected and digital world. What it also reminded us is the importance of significant non-financial risks that companies today face. So let's go to this. This is based on a survey by the World Economic Forum, which talks about what are the top 10 global risks in the near short term and over the long term. This is based on a survey which was sent out to leaders across public and private sector as well as academia. So we see 2 years and 10 years. So clearly, nature and environmental related risks are dominating the landscape across the time frame, but we also have social and technological risks which are emerging as key considerations which enterprises now need to start thinking of. Now, ESG, we all know, is environmental social governance. Just briefly talking about E stands for environment, which is how do corporate actions impact environment and physical risk. S is how corporate actions impact society, communities, employees. Could include things like product and service attributes or employee and labor practices. And G talks about governance. How does a company manage governance across all stakeholder groups? It could include considerations like business ethics, data security, data privacy, and so on, right? Now, ESG is not really new. ESG as a term was coined in 2005. So what is driving the push towards ESG? There are certain factors today which are increasingly pushing companies to have a measurable lens on ESG. The first and foremost is increasing global regulations. Regulations across the world are increasing and are increasing at a very fast pace. Now, EU has been the clear leader in this space, and one of the most recent regulations in EU is the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which mandates companies to report on the impact of their corporate actions on environment and social related aspects, which will also get assured, which means that it gets audited similar to financial information. Closer home, SEBI issued the BRSR, which is the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting Framework, which mandates top 1,000 listed companies by market capitalization to talk about their ESG performance in a quantitative and standardized framework. In the US, SEC has started mandating climate-related disclosures and talking about greenhouse gas emissions for companies. Now, with the added complexity of global regulations, and these, by the way, are just few examples, across the different markets, these global regulations are coming up. In addition to the push from regulations, we also see multiple reporting standards and framework which needs to be used for ESG because these are designed for various kinds of stakeholder groups, and therefore there is multiplicity of metrics which are being measured in very different ways. And lastly, increasing investor focus. Investors have started looking at ESG considerations for investment making decisions. These are just some key statistics based on a McKinsey investor survey of CIOs. And the demand for investors for looking at ESG considerations is also pushing the demand for data-driven metrics on ESG. So, data is now at the heart of ESG considerations, right? So a lot of ESG questions that companies need to answer are really data questions. What are these kind of questions that companies need to think about? Where do you source ESG data? How do you store this ESG data? Is it restricted? Is it highly restricted? What kind of feed and processes do you have to meet compliance and regulatory requirements? Have you developed and implemented controls to ensure the information that you are disclosing is accurate? Are you able to analyze scenarios of ESG business impacts? Can you measure carbon footprints of your own operations, and can you measure carbon footprint of your downstream supply chain? Do you understand the impacts of any transition risk which might come from internal and external change as we move towards net zero and renewable energy sources? So while data is becoming more and more important for ESG, it is also very complex to manage. It is very hard to manage. Why is that? Unlike traditional sources of data like customer data and financial data, ESG data is not owned within a single unit by an enterprise. It is scattered and siloed and can reside within multiple different units within the enterprise. Also, ESG data a lot of times is not even within an enterprise. It can be just external to an enterprise. It can be a news report. It can be a sustainability report. It can be a public database. Today, the way we collect the data or the way we process the data is very tactical, very manual, and resource intensive. We do not have a clear understanding of standards and controls. If a company is reporting emissions data, how do I know it is accurate? So what is the way that I can measure data quality is not very clear. So there's inconsistent data quality. And lastly, even if I have point-in-time data of ESG performance, it is not actionable. So there is limited insights that we can generate out of this data. Therefore, having or building a data and analytics roadmap is becoming key for enabling ESG goals. These are just some broad areas where data and analytics is being leveraged, not necessarily exhaustive. But firstly, automating data collection, which is how do we streamline data collection and workflows? How do we leverage data for AI for data collection, which could be from, for example, supplier invoices, it could be social or news data, it could be sensor data, it could be geosatellite location data or imaging data. And how do we standardize and integrate this data with a standard data taxonomy? Improving data quality, which is either automating controls to identify and monitoring gaps. We talked a lot about data quality and governance today. I think the same is relevant in the ESG space as well. How do you start using AI to remediate data gaps and build consistent governance frameworks? Building a single source of truth, so ensure and enable traceability of the data, mapping of ESG metrics to multiple frameworks, and ensure that the data can be audited. So ensure that there is auditability of the reported KPIs and metrics. And lastly, how do we start using all this data to generate insights and inform decision making? Just few examples. How do we predict climate risk? How do we build a mitigation strategy around climate risk? How do we understand our entire supply chain risks and how do we manage the same? And how do we assess client opportunities in terms of ESG risks or opportunities? So clearly, GCCs with their extensive data and analytics capabilities can play a key role in building an ESG-focused data strategy and can enable ESG outcomes for the parent organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shireen.